AITA for agreeing to my wife's breakup text and turning it into her worst nightmare. Here's the story, Redditors. I was poring over a merger contract in my downtown Chicago office when my wife's text illuminated my phone screen. I think maybe we need to break up. 5 years of marriage distilled into a flippant suggestion, as if she were debating takeout options. I stared at those words for precisely 30 seconds, my mind racing through the implications. Then, with deliberate calm, I typed back, "I agree. Your belongings will be on the porch in an hour." The ellipsis danced on my screen, appearing, vanishing, reappearing like a digital heartbeat in panic. Her frantic response flooded in. "Wait, I was joking. WTF. Alex, call me now." But I wasn't joking, and I certainly wasn't calling. What she didn't realize was that her so-called jest had just ignited a plan I'd been meticulously crafting for weeks. I closed the merger file and headed home to our Lincoln Park brownstone, a symbol of the perfect life we'd built in this city of shadows and skyscrapers, where money often bought silence and justice was a luxury for the connected. Mia's wardrobe was impeccably organized by color, a testament to her obsession with appearances. I methodically pulled dresses, blouses, and those exorbitantly priced shoes she called investments from the closet, stuffing them into garbage bags with the precision I reserved for dissecting legal documents. My phone buzzed relentlessly, Mia, calling, texting, pleading. I ignored it all. She'd claimed late nights at work for 6 consecutive evenings. I might have bought it, except I knew better. Either she was revolutionizing quantum physics, or she was entangled with someone else. Given her barely passing grade in high school chemistry, my bets were on the latter. In Chicago, where corruption seeped into every deal and alliance, I'd learned to notice the cracks before they widened. And Mia's facade was fracturing. 3 months ago, the first cracks appeared in Mia's perfect facade. It started subtly late nights at the office, a new wardrobe dripping with designer labels her salary couldn't justify, her phone suddenly password protected. She'd come home and head straight for the shower as if washing away more than just the day's stress. I'm not the type to jump to conclusions, Redditors, but I'm a corporate lawyer who makes a living spotting lies in million-dollar deals. Those details weren't just red flags, they were flashing neon signs. So I hired Daniel Carter, a former Chicago PD detective turned private investigator with a reputation for uncovering truths others buried. His report landed in my inbox 3 weeks later, and it confirmed everything I'd feared and more. Mia wasn't just cheating. She was entangled with Victor Langston, CEO of Langston Elite Properties. His name alone sounded like a private club that still checked your skin tone at the door. The photos Daniel provided were damning. Mia and Victor at a candlelit table in Gibson's Steakhouse, her hand resting on his arm, his gaze locked on her lips with predatory intent. But it wasn't just an affair. Daniel's notes hinted at something darker. Victor had coerced Mia into using recreational drugs to ensure her silence, a tactic to keep her compliant. It wasn't love, it was control. And then there was Jessica Harper, Victor's 23-year-old assistant, barely out of college, who'd been promoted after late-night meetings. The pattern was clear. Victor didn't just cheat, he preyed. I sat in our Lincoln Park brownstone, Daniel's photos spread across the dining table like evidence in a trial. My phone kept buzzing Mia's texts, her calls, her lies. I didn't answer. Hurt makes you stupid Redditors, but cold calculation, that makes you dangerous. And I was ready to be very dangerous. Mia's BMW screeched into our Lincoln Park driveway just as I dragged the last of her garbage bags to the porch. She leapt out, her perfectly styled brunette hair whipping around her face like a storm was brewing. "Alex, what the hell?" she gasped, staring at the bags, then at me in the doorway. I was kidding. I was kidding. I leaned against the frame, arms crossed. "Was it a joke? When you were with your boss? Last Tuesday? Mia? Or just when you texted me about breaking up?" Her face cycled through a masterclass of emotions. Shock, denial, anger, fear, like an actress who'd missed her Oscar-worthy role. I pulled out my phone and showed her the Gibson's photo, her hand on Victor Langston's arm, his eyes devouring her. "Daniel Carter's very thorough," I said coolly. "Former Chicago PD, now freelance. Excellent at catching lies." Her mask crumbled. "You had me followed," she sputtered. "I had my suspicions confirmed. There's a difference." She tried to push past me into the house, our house, but I blocked her. "This is my home too, Alex." "Check the deed," I said, voice like steel. "My name only. Purchased before we married. Illinois law's clear on premarital assets." Her face paled. She'd never bothered with the boring legal stuff. Another mistake in her growing collection. "You can't just kick me out," she protested. "I can, and I am. You've got 30 days to find somewhere else. Illinois is generous like that." My phone rang an unknown number, but I knew who it was. Victor Langston's voice oozed through the line. "This doesn't have to get ugly, Caldwell." Mia froze, hearing his voice. I stepped back out of her reach. "You're right, Victor," I said. "It doesn't have to get ugly. It's going to be devastating." I hung up, meeting Mia's pleading eyes. She thought her joke was the problem. She had no idea it was just the spark for the fire I'd been planning. Back in my office, I dove into Victor Langston's world like I was dissecting a hostile takeover. Public records, business filings, court documents, my law firm's databases were a gold mine for someone who knew where to look. Langston Elite Properties boasted $600 million in annual revenue with premier listings across Chicagoland and connections to the city's elite. But beneath the glossy surface cracks were everywhere. Employee turnover was astronomical, especially among young, attractive women. In 3 years, 12 women under 25 had been hired. 7 quit within 6 months, often after private meetings with Victor. 2 harassment complaints vanished behind closed doors, buried by expensive NDAs. Then I found the real filth. Daniel Carter's latest report wasn't just about affairs, it exposed a system. Victor's company was a front for laundering money for Chicago's mafia, hidden through inflated property deals and shell companies in Delaware. Worse, some of these luxury properties were used to traffic vulnerable women immigrants from Mexico and Eastern Europe, lured with promises of jobs only to be trapped in a cycle of sexual exploitation. The evidence was sickening: hotel receipts, security footage, and a photo of Victor with a terrified 19-year-old at a North Shore warehouse. She died of an overdose last year, ruled an accident. Victor's money had ensured no one looked deeper. I uncovered another player, Senator Richard Harrow, a Chicago political titan and father-in-law to Victor's wife, Claire. Harrow's campaign funds traced back to Victor's shell company's bribes to keep his crimes buried. This wasn't just infidelity. It was a predator's empire built on blood and betrayal. Daniel called with more got photos of Victor, with Jessica Harper, his assistant, in his Bentley, and financials showing cash transactions that scream money laundering. I stared at the evidence on my desk, labeled like trial exhibits. Victor wasn't just a cheater. He was a monster with a system, and I was going to dismantle it piece by piece. I drove to Claire Langston's Gold Coast mansion, a fortress of limestone and old money that screamed untouchable power. Through the windows, I glimpsed a dinner party, crystal chandeliers, tailored suits, the elite of Chicago, pretending the city wasn't rotting beneath them. I rang the bell, handing my card to the housekeeper. Alex Caldwell. I need to speak with Mrs. Langston about her husband. It's urgent. Claire appeared mid-30s with the sharp eyes of a former federal prosecutor and the poise of someone born into influence. Her black cocktail dress cost more than my car, but her grip on the door frame betrayed her nerves. Mr. Caldwell, what's this about? Your husband's not just cheating with my wife, I said, handing her a manila envelope. He's running a criminal empire. She led me to a study lined with legal texts, closing the door. I showed her Daniel's photos. Victor with Mia at Gibson's, then with Jessica Harper, his assistant in compromising positions. Then the bombshell documents, tying Victor to money laundering and human trafficking, including the death of a 19-year-old Mexican immigrant, Maria, whose overdose was no accident. Claire's face stayed composed, but her knuckles whitened as she gripped the photos. How long? She asked, voice like ice. Mia, 3 months. The others years. And there's more. Your father, Senator Harrow, took bribes to cover it up. Her eyes flickered a crack in her armor. She admitted she'd suspected Victor's aggressive business tactics, but ignored the signs until now. He made me bury a case once, she whispered. A girl barely 20 killed herself after working for him. I thought it was a one-off. Twist 1. The trafficking wasn't just a side hustle. Victor had orchestrated Maria's death to silence her after she threatened to expose his operation. Claire's composure shattered. My father helped him bury it, she said, voice trembling with rage. They're both monsters. Justice, Mrs. Langston, I said, leaning forward. We can deliver it. Together. Her eyes met mine, cold as Lake Michigan in winter. Let's burn his world to the ground. The next morning, Mia showed up at my Lincoln Park brownstone with coffee and croissants from our favorite bakery, a peace offering that had worked for smaller fights. She wore the green dress I'd once said made her eyes glow, her makeup subtle, crafted to look vulnerable. Alex, can we talk? She asked, setting the coffee on my counter. 5 years of marriage deserves that. I took the coffee, but stayed standing, my voice flat. Go ahead. Talk. This thing with Victor, it just happened. It doesn't mean anything. Her voice trembled, but her eyes darted, calculating. Which one? I shot back. The time in his office, the Bentley, or the 3 hours at the Palmer House last Tuesday. I pulled out my phone, showing her Daniel's photo of her and Victor in the car, her face unmistakable, even through tinted windows. She went pale. You really had me followed. I had facts verified. There's a difference. Her tears came next, rehearsed, but convincing. I love you, Alex. It was a stupid mistake. Then the admission I knew about some of his deals. The girls, the properties. I stayed quiet because I was scared of losing my job. My stomach churned. She wasn't just a cheater. She was complicit in Victor's trafficking ring, knowing he exploited vulnerable women like Maria. Redditors, if that doesn't make your blood boil, what does before I could respond? Daniel called. Got something new. Victor's been meeting Jessica Harper regularly, and I found a paper trail cash payments to Senator Harrow's campaign through shell companies. It's bigger than we thought. I hung up, ignoring Mia's panicked. Who was that you made your choice? Mia, I said, grabbing my keys. Multiple choices over months knowing he was destroying lives. I walked to the door. Talk to my lawyer next time. She stood frozen, clutching her coffee as I left her behind. Justice burns slow Redditors, and I was just getting started. I met Claire at a dive bar in Uptown, far from the glittering Gold Coast, where Victor's kind held court. She slid into the booth, her running clothes a stark contrast to last night's cocktail dress, her eyes burning with purpose. We end him, she said, no preamble. Not just divorce, total destruction. I nodded. Redditors, this was no longer about my broken marriage. It was about dismantling a predator who thought money made him a god. Our plan was surgical. Claire would leverage her connections, former colleagues at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and her father's judicial allies to trigger SEC and FBI investigations into Victor's money laundering and trafficking. She'd file for divorce, freezing his assets before he could flee to some offshore haven. I'd work with Daniel to gather more evidence, focusing on Jessica Harper, Victor's assistant, who'd agreed to testify about his coercion. Her story was gut-wrenching. Victor had forced her into a relationship for a promotion, threatening to deport her immigrant mother if she refused. Twist 2. Daniel uncovered a hidden drive in Victor's office. Videos of him blackmailing women, including Mia, with explicit recordings to ensure their silence. Worse, one file hinted at a darker secret. Victor had orchestrated the accidental death of a rival developer who'd threatened to expose his trafficking ring 2 years ago. The police report called it a car crash. Daniel's sources said it was sabotage. This wasn't just a cheater or a crook. Victor was a murderer hiding behind a tailored suit. We also found proof of Victor's payments to Senator Harrow, funneled through shell companies to fund a re-election campaign. Those funds tied directly to properties used for trafficking. Harrow's as dirty as Victor Clare, said her voice like a blade. They both go down. Victor wasn't clueless. That evening, he confronted me outside my office, flanked by 2 goons with poorly concealed guns. You're poking into things you don't understand. Caldwell, he sneered. Back off, or you'll regret it. I smiled cold as Chicago winter. You assumed I couldn't fight back, Victor. That was your first mistake. I walked away, his eyes boring into my back, knowing the real war was about to begin. At 3 a.m., a brick shattered my kitchen window glass, spraying across the floor like a broken promise. Attached was a note in jagged scrawl. Drop the investigation, or next time, it's not a window. I called the police. Then Claire. She arrived with private security, her face a mask of controlled fury, as cops dusted for prints they'd never find. He's panicking, she said, studying the note. This is ammunition. By morning, Daniel had more. Turn on Channel 7, he said. The news showed FBI agents storming Langston Elite Properties, the Chiron-screaming FBI raids luxury real estate firm in money laundering and trafficking probe. Victor's empire was crumbling on live TV, and I felt a savage satisfaction. But Daniel warned, he's cornered now. Men like him get dangerous when they've got nothing to lose. Mia called, her voice shaking. Victor's unhinged Alex. He's blaming you for everything, says he'll make you pay. I'm scared. I told her to stay at her sister's and call the police if he contacted her. She'd known about his trafficking, his blackmail, and stayed silent. Her fear didn't absolve her. She'd chosen to be his accomplice. Then Victor escalated. Claire showed me a text he'd sent her. Tell your new boyfriend to back off, or he'll regret it. This isn't over. Sent an hour ago, it was a direct threat to a federal judge's daughter. Pure stupidity. But the real bomb came from Daniel Victor's client list, had surfaced a digital ledger exposing Chicago's elite senators, judges, CEOs, who'd used his properties for trafficking and paid to keep it quiet. Senator Harrow's name was at the top, linked to bribes that buried Maria's death. Redditors, this was the kind of corruption that makes you want to burn the system down, powerful men exploiting the powerless, all hidden by money. Claire's eyes gleamed like a prosecutor smelling blood. This gives us probable cause for a restraining order. And men who make threats like this, they make mistakes. I nodded, knowing we were walking a tightrope. Victor wasn't just fighting for his empire, he was fighting to keep his secrets buried, and he'd drag half the city down with him. Victor's empire unraveled faster than a cheap suit. By noon, Claire's divorce papers were served, and a judge, untainted by Senator Harrow's influence, granted an emergency asset freeze. Victor's accounts properties, even his prized Bentley, were locked down. The FBI raid uncovered more ledgers, matching Daniel's evidence, proving Victor's company laundered millions for Chicago's mafia and trafficked women through luxury rentals. Jessica Harper's testimony was the nail in the coffin. She detailed Victor's coercion, the blackmail videos, and how he'd threatened her mother's deportation. Redditors, hearing her story, how a 23-year-old was trapped by a predator, makes your fists clench. Then came the second blow. Senator Harrow, exposed by Victor's leaked client list, was indicted for taking bribes to bury Maria's murder. That night, news broke Harrow took his own life in his Lakeview penthouse, leaving a note confessing to his role in Victor's schemes. The city reeled. Chicago's corruption laid bare from boardrooms to the Senate floor. Victor made one last play. He released his full ledger online, a digital Molotov cocktail exposing dozens of Chicago's elite. My name was in it. My firm had unknowingly handled mergers for his shell companies. Reporters swarmed. My career teetered, but I refused to bend. Then at O'Hare, FBI agents nabbed Victor trying to board a flight to Costa Rica. His tailored suit rumpled, his arrogance gone. In jail, he attempted suicide with a smuggled blade, pathetic. But he survived, left to face trial in a cell. Twist aftermath. Mia faced charges for aiding Victor's trafficking cover-up. Her "I was scared" excuse crumbling under evidence of her complicity. Jessica's testimony freed a dozen women from Victor's properties, their stories sparking protests across Chicago. My phone buzzed with Mia's final call. "You destroyed everything." I hung up thinking, no, you did. Justice wasn't clean, but seeing Victor's world burn, that was satisfaction. AITA Redditors. I lost everything. My marriage, my career, my name now tied to Chicago's ugliest corruption scandal. But as I sat in my half-empty Lincoln Park brownstone, sipping scotch and watching news vans swarm outside, I felt a strange peace. Victor Langston was in a cell, his empire ash. Mia was facing trial, her perfect facade shattered by her own choices. Claire, relentless as ever, was pushing for new laws to protect immigrants from predators like her husband. And Jessica Harper, she was rebuilding her life, her testimony freeing over a dozen women from the hell Victor created. Their faces, Maria's included, flashed on the news no longer just victims, but survivors sparking a movement. I'd played a dangerous game, and the blast radius caught me too. My firm fired me when Victor's ledger implicated our merger deals. Reporters painted me as either a hero or a reckless vigilante, depends on the headline. But justice, as Claire said, burns slow and leaves nothing behind. Victor thought money made him untouchable. He learned otherwise. Senator Harrow's suicide exposed the rot in Chicago's elite, and the protests outside City Hall demanded accountability. I'd lost my old life, but from the ashes, something new emerged, a clarity that sometimes when the system fails, you have to tear it down yourself. Mia's last voicemail played. "I'm sorry, Alex. What happens now?" I deleted it, looking at Claire across the room, already planning her next move. "Now we deal with the consequences," I said, half to her, half to the ghosts of our old lives. All of us. Redditors, was it justice or revenge? Maybe it's both when a predator's empire falls, and you're left standing in the ruins, knowing you lit the match.